Chapter 10 of Gulliver of Mars by Edwin L. Arnold. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by James Christopher. Gulliver of Mars by Edwin L. Arnold. Chapter 10. Off into the forest I went, feeling a boyish elation to be so free, nor taking heed nor count of the reckless adventures before me. The Martian weather for the moment was lovely, and the many-colored grass lush and soft underfoot. Mile after mile I went, heeding the distance lightly, the air was so elastic. Now pressing forward as the main interest of my errand took the upper hand, and remembrance of poor Heru like a crushed white flower in the red grip of those cruel ravishers came upon me. And then pausing to sigh with pleasure or stand agape, forgetful even of her, in wonder of the unknown loveliness about me. And well might I stare. Everything in that forest was wonderful. There were plants which turned from color to color with the varying hours of the day, while others had a growth so swift it was dangerous to sit in their neighborhood, since the long succulent tendrils clambering from the parent stem would weave you into a helpless tangle while you stared, fascinated, upon them. There were plants that climbed and walked, sighing plants who called to the winged things of the air to them with a noise as like to a girl sobbing that again and again I stopped in the tangled path to listen. There were green bladder mosses which swam about the surface of the still pools like giant frog broods. There were on the ridges warrior trees burning in the vindictiveness of a long forgotten cause, a blaze of crimson scimitar thorns from root to topmost twig. And down again in the cool hollows were lady bushes making twilight of the green gloom with their cloudy ivory blossoms and filling the shadows with such a heavy scent that head and heart reeled with a fatal pleasure as one pushed aside their branches. Every river bed was full of mighty reeds, whose stems clattered together when the wind blew like swords on shields, and every now and then a bit of forest was woven together with the ropey stems of giant creepers till no man or beast could have passed save for the paths which constant use had kept open through the mazes. All day long I wandered on through those wonderful woodlands, and in fact loitered so much over their infinite marvels that when sundown came all too soon there was still undulating forest everywhere, vistas of fairy glades on every hand, peopled with incredible things and echoing with sounds that excited the ears as much as other things fascinated the eyes, but no sign of the sea or my fishing village anywhere. It did not matter. A little of the Martian leisureliness was getting into my blood. If not today, why then tomorrow, as An would have said. And with this for comfort, I selected a warm sandy hollow under the roots of a big tree, made my brief arrangements for the night, ate some honey cakes, and was soon sleeping blissfully. I woke early next morning, after many hours of interrupted dreams, and having nothing to do till the white haze had lifted and made it possible to start again, rested idly a time on my elbow and watched the sunshine filter into the recesses. Very pretty it was to see the thick canopy overhead, by starlight so impenetrable, open its chinks and fissures as the searching sun came upon it, to see the pinhole gaps shine like spangles presently, the spaces broaden into lesser suns, and even the thick leafage brighten and shine down upon me with a soft sea-green radiance. The sunward sides of the tree stems took a glow, and the dew that ran dripping down their mossy sides trickled blood-red to earth. Elsewhere the shadows were still black, and strange things began to move in them, things we in our middle-aged world have never seen the likeness of. Beasts half birds, birds half creeping things, and creeping things which it seemed to me passed through the lesser creations down to the basest life that crawls without interruption or division. It was not for me, a sailor, to know much of such things, yet some I could not fail to notice. On one grey branch overhead, jutting from a tree stem where a patch of velvet moss made in the morning glint a fairy bed, a wonderful flower unfolded. It was a splendid bud, ivory white, cushioned in leaves and secured to its place by naked white roots that clipped the branch like fingers of a lady's hand. Even as I looked it opened, a pale white star, and hung pensive and inviting on its mossy cushion. From it came such a ravishing odour that even I, at the further end of the great scale of life, felt my pulse quicken and my eyes brighten with cupidity. I was in the very act of climbing the tree, but before I could move hand or foot two things happened, whether you take my word for them or no. Firstly, up through the glade in the underwood, attracted by the odour, came an ugly brown bird with a capacious beak and shining claws. He perched near by, and peeped and peered until he made out the flower pining on her virgin stem, whereat off he hopped to her branch, and there, with a cynical chuckle, strutted to and fro between her and the main stem like an ill genius guarding a fairy princess. Surely heaven would not allow him to tamper with so chaste a bud. My hand reached for a stone to throw at him, when happened the second thing. There came a gentle pat upon the woodland floor, and from the tree overhead dropped down another living plant, like the one above, yet not exactly similar. A male, my instincts told me, in full solitary blossom like her above, cinctured with leaves, and supported by half a score of white roots that worked, as I looked, like the limbs of a crab. In a twinkling that party-coloured gentleman vegetable near me was off to the stem upon which grew his lady love, running and scrambling, dragging the finery of his tasselled petals behind. It was laughable to watch his eagerness. He got a grip of the tree, and up he went, hand over hand, root over root. I had just time to note others of his species had dropped here and there upon the ground, and were hurrying with frantic haste to the same destination, when he reached the fatal branch, and was straddling victoriously down it, blind to all but love and longing. That ill-omened bird, who stood above the maiden flower, let him come within a stalk's length, so near that the white splendour of his sleeping lady gleamed within arm's reach. Then the giant beak was opened, the great claws made a clutch, the gallant's head was yanked from his neck, and as it went tumbling down the maw of the feathered thing, his white legs fell spinning through space, and lay knotting themselves in agony upon the ground for a minute or two, before they relaxed and became flaccid in the repose of death. Another and another vegetable suitor made for that fatal tryst, and as each came up, the snap of the brown bird's beak was all their obsequies. At last no more came, and then that nemesis of claws and quilled walked over to the girl flower, his stomach feathers ruffled with repletion, the green blood of her lovers dripping from his claws, and pulled her golden heart out, tore her white limbs one from the other, and swallowed her piecemeal before my very eyes. Then up in wrath I jumped, and yelled at him till the woods echoed, but too late to stay his sacrilege. By this time the sun was bathing everything in splendour, and turning away from the wonders about me, I set off at best pace along the well-trodden path which led without turning to the west coast village where the canoes were. It proved far closer than expected. As a matter of fact, the forest in this direction grew right down to the water's edge, the salt-loving trees actually overhanging the waves, one of the pleasantest sights in nature. And thus I came right out on top of the hamlet before there had been an indication of its presence. It occupied two sides of a pretty little bay, the third side being flat land given over to the cultivation of an enormous species of gourd whose characteristic yellow flowers and green succulent leaves were discernible even at this distance. I branched off along the edge of the surf and down a dainty little flowery path, noticing meanwhile how the whole bay was filled by hundreds of empty canoes, while scores of others were drawn up upon the strand, and the first thing I chanced upon was a group of people, youthful of course, with the eternal Martian bloom, and in the splendid simplicity of almost complete nakedness. My first idea was that they were bathing, and fixing my eyes on the tree tops with great propriety, I gave a warning cough. At that sound, instead of getting to cover or close, all started and stood staring for a time like a herd of startled cattle. It was highly embarrassing. They were right in the path, a round dozen of them, naked, and so little ashamed that when I edged away modestly they began to run after me. And the farther they came forward, the more I retired, till we were playing a kind of game of hide-and-seek round the tree stems. In the middle of it my heel caught on a root, and down I went very hard and very ignominiously, whereupon those laughing, light-hearted folk rushed in, and with smiles and jest helped me to my feet. Was I the traveller who had come from Seth? Yes. Oh, then that was well. They had heard such a traveller was on the road, and had come a little way down the path as far as might be without fatigue to meet him. Would I eat with them? These amiable strangers asked, pushing their soft warm fingers into mine and ringing me round with a circle. But firstly might they help me out of my clothes? It was hot, and these things were cumbersome. As to the eating, I was agreeable enough seeing how casual meals had been with me lately, but my clothes, though heaven knows they were getting horribly ragged and travel-stained, I clung to desperately. My new friends shrugged their dimpled shoulders, and arguments being tedious, at once squatted round me in the dappled shade of a big tree, and produced their stores of never-failing provisions. After a pleasant little meal taken thus in the open with all the simplicity Martians delight in, we got to talking about those yellow canoes which were bobbing about on the blue waters of the bay. Would you like to see where they are grown? Asked an individual basking by my side. Grown, I answered with incredulity. Built, you mean. Never in my life did I hear of growing boats. But then, sir, observed the girl, as she sucked the honey out of the stalk of an azure convolvulus flower, and threw the remains at a butterfly that sailed across the sunshine, you know so little. You have come from afar, from some barbarous and barren district. Here we undoubtedly grow our boats. And though we know the Thither folk and such uncultivated races make their craft by cumbrous methods of flat planks, yet we prefer our own way.